Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. We are from group 7. In this video, we are going to talk about attitude to language, vernacular dialects, and education disadvantages language, culture, and interaction in the classroom. Before that, the honorable to our lecturer, Ma'am Dian Elina, SPDM4. Well, my friends, now I would like to introduce our group members. There are Meldha Sri Janneri, Nurul Maskana, Nazhif, Alfaqih, Ahmad, Roza Amaliyah, and me, Vahra, Dilla, Azzahra. Well, my friends, keep watching.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Roza Amaliyah and I'm from group 7. So, I'm gonna explain about attitude to language. First, let me introduce to you what is attitude to language. Introduction. In this chapter, we learn what the meaning attitudes to language and sociolinguistics and education. Each people have attitudes about language in general, their language and the language of other people. They may feel that unwritten language is not a real language. They may feel shame when other people hear their language. They may believe that they can only know one language at a time. They may feel that the national language is the best language for expressing patriotism, the best way to get a job, the best chance at improving their children's future. Attitude to language. Attitude to language is a construct that explains linguistics behavior in particular. It may be positive or negative as well as instrumental or integrative. Language attitudes are opinions, ideas, and prejudices that speakers have with respect to a language. For example, it is often said that in order to learn a language, it often helps to have a positive attitude towards the language. Attitude to language are strongly influenced by social and political factors. As was evident in the discussion in many earlier chapters, language varieties have indexing properties which all members of the community are aware of. Language planner must take account of attitudes when they select a suitable language for development as an official or national language. It has been suggested that intelligibility is also affected by attitudes. People generally find it easier to understand language and dialects spoken by people they like or admire. People generally do not hold opinions about language in a vacuum. They develop attitudes toward language which indicate their views about those who speak the languages and the contexts and functions with which they are associated. Examples of strong views towards languages. First, language riots in Belgium and India. Second, getting rid of English root signs in Wales. Third, change in attitudes towards English and French in Quebec. Last, long delay in developing a script for written Somali. That's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nazhif Alfaqih Ahmad. In this opportunity, I'd like to explain about standard variety of language, then non-standard variety of language, and attitudes to vernacular forms of English. Now let's first talk about standard variety of language versus non-standard variety of language. A standard language, or it is also called as standard variety, standard dialect, or standard, is a language variety that has undergone substantial codification of grammar and usage, and it is employed by a population for public communication. For example, Standard English and Standard French. While a non-standard language variety that has not historically benefited from the institutional support or sanction that a standard dialect has. A non-standard dialect has an internally coherent system of grammar. It may be associated with a particular set of vocabulary and spoken using a variety of accents, styles, and registers. For example, non-standard phonemic spelling of reported speech in literature or poetry. Well, let's continue to attitudes to vernacular forms of English. The term vernacular is used in a number of ways. It generally refers to a language which hasn't been standardized and which doesn't have official status. There are hundreds of vernacular languages, such as African American vernacular English, and Indonesia such as Javanese, Bataknese, and Sundanese languages. In the USA, AAVE has been at the center of a debate about the role of vernacular varieties in education for at least 4 decades. The use of vernacular forms is clearly patterned and systematic, not random and haphazard. Vernacular forms express different lines and relaxed attitudes appropriate in casual context. Okay, that's all from me. Move to the next presenter.
Okay, my friends, my name is Vahra Dilla Azzahra. Here I want to continue the explanation from my friend. Now we come to sociolinguistics and education. Well, there are basic insight in dialect awareness. The first one is, if you speak a language, you speak a dialect of that language. Then all dialects are patterned, regular, and rule-governed. The third one is, all dialects are linguistically equal, even if socially unequal. The last one is a paraphrase from Walt Wolfram. As we see a people, we see their language. As we see a language, so we see a people. Okay, dialect differences can certainly lead to miscommunication, especially if vernacular dialect users do not hear a great deal of the standard dialect. Now we come to language and disadvantages. Disadvantage relates to all sorts of differences and shortcomings as exhibited by certain individuals and groups. As the latter are unfavorably compared to the mainstream norms and ideologies, it goes without saying that it is by dint of comparing people to certain others, rather than evaluating them on their own merits, that the disadvantage arises. Well, that's all from my explanation. We continue to the next explanation. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Well, I'm Meldha Sri Janneri. I would like to continue Roza explanations. Okay, let's start it. The first materials about genetic and environmental deficit. Genetic deficit, in his attempt to account for the poor performance of some children, especially black, as well as for the failures of compensatory education, Ellen Johnson is a seminal albeit controversial article in the Harvard Education Review 1969 argued that the cause of this advantage are genetic in nature. It means faktor genetik adalah salah satu faktor keturunan atau yang diwariskan dari kedua orang tuanya yang bersifat secara natural. Adapun beberapa faktor genetik yaitu seperti penyakit, kelainan, ataupun anak yang berkulit hitam, yang mana kemungkinan besar kedua orang tuanya memiliki kulit hitam ataupun salah satu dari mereka. Next, environmental deficit. Within the context of environmentalist theory, the disadvantaged child is unable to cope with school life and the challenge is present by virtue
of deficiencies in his social and psychological background. Jadi, faktor lingkungan adalah segala sesuatu yang terdapat di sekitar kita dan juga kehidupan manusia. Adapun beberapa faktor lingkungan yaitu faktor fisik, sosial, dan latar belakang psikologis. Next, language, cultures, and interactions in the classroom. The relationship between language and cultures, is deeply rooted. Language is used to maintain and convey cultures and cultural ties. Different ideas stem from different language used within one's cultures, and the whole interweaving of these relationships start at one birth. Jadi, hubungan antara bahasa dan budaya sangat mengakar dan saling mengikat, yang mana bahasa digunakan untuk memelihara dan menyampaikan budaya dan ikatan budaya tersebut. Ide-ide yang berbeda berasal dari penggunaan bahasa yang berbeda dalam budaya seseorang, dan seluruh jalinan hubungan ini dimulai dari sejak lahir. Adapun contoh antara hubungan antar bahasa dan budaya dapat kita lihat dari peribahasa atau pepatah Melayu. Yang mana peribahasa atau pepatah Melayu mencerminkan sifat, sikap, dan keadaan bangsa Melayu pada waktu itu. Next, classroom are dynamic space of teaching and learning, where language and culture are interviewed in remarkable way. The theory of language socialization explores how social cultures practice in classroom help to speech language learning and development. And interactions help to learner develop language learning and social skill, and so mixed interactions in the classroom is an important part of teacher role. Ruang kelas adalah ruang pengajar dan pembelajaran secara dinamis, di mana bahasa dan budaya saling terkait dengan cara yang luar biasa. Teori sosialisasi bahasa mengeksplorasi bagaimana praktik sosial kultural di kelas membantu pembelajaran dan pengembangan bahasa. Sedangkan interaksi membantu pembelajar mengembangkan pembelajaran bahasa dan keterampilan sosial sehingga memaksimalkan interaksi di dalam kelas. Okay, I think enough. Sorry for my mistake. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurul Maskana. In this video, I would like to present the last part of this chapter. It is about the interaction in the classroom. Well, let me start from the how to integrate culture into the classroom as the instructor or the teacher. First, as the instructor, we have to know the power of the oral tradition, which means we have to know the atmosphere of oral tradition in the classroom. Nah, for example, kalau misalnya kita ngajar di kelas yang kebanyakan atau notabene siswanya itu berbicara dengan bahasa daerah mereka masing-masing. Jadi, as the instructor, we have to adjust it. Jadi kita harus menyesuaikan diri supaya anak-anak itu bisa berinteraksi dengan baik dengan kita sebagai guru dan murid. Okay, the second is use geometry to describe setting up the classroom so that you maintain your students' attention. In the second part, as the instructor, we suggest you to use geometry atau menggunakan alat ukur untuk menggambarkan bagaimana cara menyeting kelas sehingga sebagai guru atau instructor kita bisa maintain atau gain student attention. Jadi dapat perhatian dari murid kalau misalnya kita udah tahu alat ukur yang akan kita pakai. And then the third is give your students time to work on projects as teams. Nah, cara ketiga yaitu dengan memberikan waktu kepada murid untuk bekerja dalam suatu project sebagai tim so that there is interaction and they can interact to each other. Okay, and then the fourth is give your students time to explore individually. Jadi kalau sudah tadi secara tim, nah yang keempat itu juga disarankan untuk siswanya itu bekerja secara individu. Okay, and then the fifth is invite speakers from different cultures. Nah, in language class, we suggest you to invite speakers from different cultures as the comparison or as the comparison or as the sebagai perbandingan atau sebagai cara supaya murid-muridnya itu bisa mendapatkan ilmu atau additional material.
Well, the sixth is be courteous to your students. As an instructor, of course, we have to have courteous or rasa kepedulian terhadap siswa. Jadi interaksi di dalam kelas itu bisa berjalan dengan baik. And then the seventh, incorporate different perspectives into lessons. Nah, in the seven steps, we suggest you to incorporate atau menggabungkan perspektif, cara pandang berpikir yang berbeda-beda ke dalam pelajaran, sehingga interaksi yang terjadi di dalam kelas itu berjalan dengan baik. And then use technology. In this digital era, it is very possible for us to use technology in the classroom, in the classroom and for interactively. Well, the next part is the linguistically informed ways of talking about language, according to Weller and Swartz 2006. Here is the approaches that can be used for the previous steps in the classroom. There are two approaches, correctionist approach and code switching or contrastivist approach. In correctionist approach, itu pendekatan yang berdasarkan perbaikan. Nah, whereas in code switching or contrastivist approach, pendekatan yang berdasarkan code switching atau menggunakan code switching dalam pendekatannya. Here are the rules. In correctionist approach, language as proper or improper, good or bad. Jadi dalam correctionist approach ini, bahasa itu sebagai benar atau tidak benar, baik atau buruk. Meanwhile, in code switching or contrastivist approach, language as appropriate or inappropriate, effective or ineffective. In a setting, appropriate to the time, place, audience, and communicative purpose. Sedangkan, dalam code switching, bahasa sebagai tepat atau tidak tepat, efektif atau tidak efektif. Dalam setting waktu, tepat atau tidak tempatnya, waktunya, dan audiensnya. Ataupun juga tujuan dari berbicara tersebut. And then, in language. In correctionist approach, language is right or wrong. Language is correct or incorrect. Meanwhile, in language of code switching or contrastive approach, language follows a pattern. Language ranges from formal to informal. Language varies by setting. Jadi dalam pendekatan correctionist atau perbaikan, bahasa itu benar atau tidak benar, bahasa itu benar atau salah. Sedangkan dalam code switching, bahasa itu mengikuti aturan, terstruktur. Okay, and then the student in corrections approach, the student made mistakes, errors. The student is having a problem with plurals, possessives, tense, and etc. The student left off an additional S, apostrophe S, and final ed. Meanwhile, in code switching or contrastivist approach, the student is following the patterns of home speech or informal English. The student is using a grammatical pattern different from formal English. Jadi kalau dalam correctionist approach itu muridnya itu terstruktur. Jadi kesalahan-kesalahan yang dibuat itu berdasarkan grammatical. Meanwhile, dalam code switching itu murid-murid itu mengikuti aturan dalam informal English. Jadi grammatical itu beda dengan yang diajarkan dalam bahasa Inggris formal. Nah, gitu. Okay. Next is the student is supposed to, needs to correct. Meanwhile, in code switching or contrastivist approach, the student may code switch or choose the language pattern to fit the settings. Nah, jadi kalau di dalam pendekatan correctionist ini, murid itu atau siswa itu harus diperbaiki. Kesalahan-kesalahan yang diperbuat itu harus diperbaiki. Sedangkan kalau dalam pendekatan code switching tadi, siswa yang membuat kesalahan itu boleh code switch atau memilih bahasa yang tepat sesuai dengan suasana. Jadi, for example, in correctionist approach, it is used in written language. Meanwhile, in code switching, it is used in spoken English. Like that. Okay, for the teachers, in correctionist approach, teachers correct the language. Jadi dari kesalahan-kesalahan yang dibuat oleh siswa tadi, tugas guru ialah memperbaiki kesalahan tersebut dan memberitahu apa kesalahan yang telah diperbuat. Meanwhile, in code switching or contrastivist, teachers help students translate, change, code switch, or from in one variety to another. Sedangkan kalau dalam pendekatan code switching tadi, guru itu membantu siswa untuk menerjemahkan, mengubah atau memparaphrase. Bisa juga meng-code switch dari varietas satu ke yang lainnya. Okay. Well, that's all from me. Thank you very much for your good attention. Here is the references that we used to make this PowerPoint. I hope you get the point, and if you have any questions, you may ask on our discussion forum. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.